Okay, good morning. Maybe it's too late to say good morning, but for someone it is like morning feeling. And hello, today's the second day, and the session's themes are renovation and preservation. I am Aune. I live in a log house like AA, and I'm a host for this session. As I mentioned, me and my family live in a log house. It's a traditional Estonian barn house dating back to 1892. It looks like the house is in open-air museum if you visited it. And it feels lived inside also like an ancient times. Because we didn't have yet any big renovations in this house. And in fact, I worked at the Estonian Open Air Museum for 10 years, which is why I feel exciting and relaxed at the same time to introduce today's speakers. Okay, let's now get down to business. Coming up, there will be 3 presentations from Estonian Open Air Museum. The first presenter is Vivian. Vivian Siirman is a head of rural architecture development at the Estonian Open Air Museum, Center for Rural Architecture. In her work, she has seen how a historical building in a museum can be a valuable object under national protection, an exciting subject for research, and a great place to relive. History and the same time, all these 3 things. As a historian, she is interested in the past of museums and their collections, and how museums as an environment and institution have changed over time. Please welcome to the stage Vivian.
So yes, Aune already introduced me. My name is Vivian Siirman, and today I'm talking about museum collections, and actually precisely about museal buildings, which is the core of Estonian open-air museum collections. So with this I invite you to think about the background of how we value log buildings, and how, for example, this what we have heard here today is also connected with how we have seen the log houses and vernacular architecture in the past. So this presentation will start from the beginning, so to say. So I will go back in history. Maybe some of you already visited the Estonian Open Air Museum the day before the conference, so you have in mind what it looks like. It's like a village consisting of different parts of Estonian vernacular architecture, not far from Tallinn city center. And open-air museums are, of course, not an Estonian thing. It's a very much a global thing. And how did it become the museum? These museums, even though they are like villages, are not natural. They have been built on the site. And how did they come to life? So I will just go back 100 years ago, or even a bit more, to think about like how a national awakening started. Also this idea that we should collect the remnants of Estonian folk cultural life, folk traditions, because in the 19th century Estonians were mainly peasants. They were living on the land side and villages, And this national awakening just began in the second half of 19th century, when Estonians started to feel themselves as Estonians, as a nation who could actually have something of their own history, their own traditions. And it all started with folklore collections. So Jakob Hurt was a notable intellectual who started to collect Estonian proverbs, stories, folk tales, and he had a massive correspondence network in the villages where people actually went house to house and wrote down these important remnants of the Estonian folklore. But from the folklore on, there was a starting interest in also other parts of the folk culture. And it started, I think, mostly with interest in folk arts. But since it was also the time when there was a rapid industrialization, a rapid urbanization, then the intellectual already began to understand that this way of life, as the Estonian peasants were living in the traditional way, with their customs, with their traditions and how to tend the fields, how to tend animals, how to build houses, how to make their traditional costumes, that it's going to vanish very soon. And so also there were some attempts to collect also these, not just the intangible heritage, but also the material culture, the costumes, different kind of household items and so on. And in 1909, Estonian National Museum was established, mainly to first to house this massive folklore collection that Jakob Hurt had been able to collect. Nowadays it's in the Estonian Folklore Archive, and the Estonian National Museum is more concentrated on the material culture. But when this interest in the traditional way of life was on the rise, then of course there was also interest in the rural architecture, these log buildings, and mainly the barn dwelling where Estonian peasants had been living for centuries. And already in 1913, the notable intellectual William Ernits noted that these buildings will be gone in a few years. So they already had the idea that this village life will not be for long. And there was also an idea that in Estonia there should also be an open-air museum where we could gather all those old buildings and to show them, and not only the buildings, but also the way of life, the traditional household, all these customs and beliefs. And in this idea, the Scandinavian open-air museum served as a role model, because in Finland, in Sweden, in Denmark, those villages had been, open-air museums had been opened in the end of 19th century, in the beginning of 20th century. So there was also this idea that Estonia should also have an open-air museum where we could show this traditional way of life as a whole, as buildings, household items, everything, as it was in Skansen. And the Skansen was, I think, the most notable role model. And this idea first started to go around in the heads of Estonian intellectuals, but also it wasn't very sure where to build this museum, because this Estonian National Museum was in Tartu. They also didn't have a lot of room, so there were some talks if we should build it in Tartu or in Tallinn. and different kind of ideas. So it was at the beginning it was the biggest question where to build this museum, because it needs a lot of room. And since Estonia became independent in 1918, then after this idea of creating an open-air museum started to, well, it was in the independent republic, it was more likely to have it. And in 1929 and 1931, there was actually an Estonian open-air museum society that tried to start this to gather money for actually creating this museum. And in the beginning it wasn't sure which kind of buildings there should be or which kind of collections this open-air museum should have, because in Skansen, for example, it's also connected with a zoo and botanical gardens, and so it was also in Estonia. The idea was that maybe we should connect it with a larger entertainment park where you could see some medieval ruins of the Pirita monastery, for example, or visit the zoo and then see this old village architecture. But unfortunately, in the 20s and 30s, this campaign didn't come to anything because there wasn't enough money. There were other more important things on the field of museums and cultural heritage as well. But some good things came out of it. So actually the study of Estonian vernacular architecture it became an academic subject. So also in this case it was the Scandinavians or the Finnish who were the role models. So Ilmari Manninen actually published a large overview of Estonian folk culture, which also contains parts of architecture. And in 1939, Gustav Rank defended his doctoral thesis with the study of vernacular architecture of Saaremaa. And this study was actually this was actually the first doctoral thesis in the field of ethnology that was defended in Estonia. And it's also a very large study and very interesting material. But unfortunately, then the Soviet time came, and it kind of ended this first wave of ethnographical studies about vernacular architecture. But soon after the Second World War, the interest in the vernacular architecture came back, because it was also inevitable. It was actually, well, it was to be seen everywhere that village life after the Second World War was in a very bad state, because a lot of these buildings had been demolished. Also, a lot of these buildings were used for example, firewood, because there was a shortage of firewood. And there was also the sense that people are going to the cities they move out of these beautiful old villages, and they are just left or abandoned. And in 50s, this new field work I would say in Soviet style started. So there was an architect who came from Siberia, who was actually of Estonian descent, came back to Estonia and started the field work and study of Estonian vernacular architecture. And he was also the one who was really campaigning for opening an open-air museum. And at the same time, also the Moscow Ethnographic Institute took interest in the Estonian ethnography. And in 1953, actually 2 dissertations on Estonian vernacular architecture were defended in Leningrad and Moscow by architect Karl Tihase and then a Russian ethnographer Natalia Shlugina. And also these larger expeditions that were led from Moscow started to document vernacular architecture in the 50s. And this actually led to the idea of Estonian open-air museum, that this was seen as a need, because this interest in vernacular architecture and also heritage protection was on the rise. So finally in 1957 it was established on paper that the Estonian Open Air Museum should be opened, and also a location or a territory was granted for the museum near Tallinn, in a place called Rocca al Mare, which was a former summer residence of a wealthy Baltic German family who had then fled to Germany in Second World War. And there was a group of people, ethnographers, architects, who were connected with this idea of establishing the Open Air Museum, and also they began the works on the project of the Open Air Museum. So the document was signed in 1957 in May, actually. We just celebrated our birthday again, and already a year later there was a complete project on how this museum should be built. And it was really in the close cooperation of architects and ethnographers. And on the same time, we should bear in mind that it was in the Soviet time, so it's actually, we like to see the Estonian Open Air Museum as a sort of a national project, but on the same time, it was also a Soviet project. So, as you know, there is this line, the nationalist informed socialist in content, and I might say that the creating of Open Air Museum at that time carried also this idea. So it was actually the first open-air museum in the Soviet Union to be built according to the Soviet ethnographic principles. So actually the first one was in Riga, but it was established in 1924, so during the independence. So it was seen, this creating of Estonian Open Air Museum was seen as a sort of like a win for the Soviet ethnography as well. Estonian Open Air Museum, I hope you can see, there's a photo of the first preliminary plan of the museum. As it was in Skansen, as it was actually in other parts, in other open-air museums, the museum was divided into zones, of ethnographic zones. So in Estonia, in our museum, it's North Estonia, South Estonia, West Estonia, and islands. Even though it doesn't really correspond to the actual ethnographic zone. So, for example, some minorities were kind of included in the larger areas. For example, the Setu architecture and cultural life, or the Swedes who lived on the Estonian west coast were included in either West Estonian area or South Estonian, even though they were like architecturally different areas. And there was this idea that a very sort of academic scientific idea to make this village as ethnographically accurate as possible, to have all the farmsteads based on the actual, what you can see in Estonia, in the villages, all the structures, buildings, also the interiors, how the farms are like located to each other, and how the buildings are on the yard, how it was. And but in this sense, it was also important to know to point out that it was meant to be as a typical representation of these villages, of these buildings. So there was nothing taken directly out of a village or out of a farmyard, but it meant an extensive field work around Estonia to establish what is typical for West Estonia, what is typical for North Estonia, and so on. And but in this first project, it was actually also established a list of farmsteads and standalone buildings, and the list kind of shows that there was really an aim to get as many different examples of architecture as possible, and to show all these different sides of the vernacular architecture. So for example, here is a plan of North Estonia from the 1958 project list. So it should have a farmstead from the end of 19th century, and then of course a cotter's household, the poor peasant's household. So to mark the differences, which was also very important for the Soviet ethnography, to point out these differences between folk people. Then different kinds of households, fishermen, handicrafters, net sheds, and also the standalone objects like windmills. And it meant, and also there was, as I said before, that there was, when it was first started this idea of Estonian open air or an open air museum, then it wasn't sure which kind of buildings there should be. If it should have also these very historically notable buildings, for example, like Ruhnu Church, which is the oldest wooden church in Estonia from 1644, and it's on a very small island, Ruhnu, and it was actually, it's a huge project to actually disassemble this church and to bring it to Estonia, but it was first considered as one of the notable houses that definitely should be in the Estonian Open Air Museum. So there were also already some drawings done, measurements taken to document this thing. And the same was with Viitna Tavern, which was also in the first list that they should be brought to the museum, a notable historical building. But unfortunately, I might say, those buildings are still where they are standing, when they were standing and they were in their original place, and they're actually working as a tavern and as a church. So yes, in the 50s and 60s there was a really large field work was done because all of the list of these buildings had to be gathered, and suitable buildings had to be found. They had to be in the right era, they had to be from the right region, so it was actually a very, very large field work that was done during those times. And as I said, yes, the focus was on typical examples, and complexes were not taken from the villages as a whole, but rather the complexes were made out of different suitable buildings from different villages and different farms. So we can have from examples from many, many villages in one area. But on the same time, it was very hard times in Estonian rural life, because in the 40s there was mass deportation, collectivization, and new rural settlements were started, which meant that the farms actually were, a lot of the farms were abandoned, buildings were taken down, they were used for building new buildings or just for firewood. And the museum builders already had this feeling that they are building a monument for the Estonian farm, that this Estonian vernacular architecture as it was shall vanish in quite soon. And building of a museum also meant that this new method of disassembly and restoration of these chosen objects had to be found out. So there was a process developed how to document these buildings by taking photographs, making architectural drawings, and also ethnographic descriptions. And buildings were, when they were disassembled in the village, then they were taken apart using a specific method. For example, here are some photos of disassembling this Kahala water mill. So the logs were all marked, and there were like precise drawings made how to put them back together. And this is the original building in its original place. And it was really a close cooperation of ethnographers and architects who then had to restore those buildings in the museum. And also it's worth noting that the buildings were restored to a specific era. So in the in the villages, those buildings might have looked in one way, but when they were brought to the museum, then they had to serve this educational purpose. So some parts maybe were scrapped, newer additions were scrapped, for example, and the building was sort of like brought back to its original state of 18th century, 19th century, beginning of 19th century, and so on. So they are not like original in a way that they were in the villages. So yes, from this time also there is a lot of photographs, this large collection of documentation on the buildings. And also there was the system that the ethnographers went on a field work, they chose the objects, and then there was this museum science council, so to say, had to approve all of those buildings. So it was important that all these aspects of typicality, of a correct example of the era, and all of these were met. So here is also a picture of building the Kahala the water mill, in the museum. So actually the museum was in a very, very wet place. Parts of it was a nice park, but parts of it were very wet. So there was a lot of work done to raise the ground and to make it dry enough for the buildings. So now here we have this Kahala water mill in the museum. So which kind of buildings were brought to the museum? The most notable, of course, is the barn dwelling. This is from Kolga farm, and this is actually the core of the collection. This old type of Estonian dwelling where you have the threshing floor and a place for drying the crops in one place where you could also live with your family. Also, all of these outbuildings had to be there. So, for example, storage, this village structures, for example, windmills were brought. And also different kind of architecture which was notable for a specific area. For example, here we have from this coastal area, from a Finnish, it's actually a building for a fisherman, but it has this sand bench which is insulating the floors, so to say, from the outer walls. And also religious buildings. So this is actually a Moravian church house, the inside of a Moravian church praying house, which was brought to the museum. So actually, it's interesting to think that it was during Soviet times, but still this whole of the museum encompasses kind of this traditional way of life in the 19th century. So it has all of these different kind of classes, and there's not the notion of this sort of like a Soviet way of life, which actually we have now in the museum. We have this Soviet type of kolkhoz apartment building, but in the Soviet times it was not. It was actually this ethnographic collection was to show how this socialist way of life is improving people's lives, and they don't have to go to these kind of dark, cold, vernacular buildings anymore. And also a tavern, for example, and this is also an original cotter's house, so this was also important to show these social differences. So this is actually a building that was brought as an entirety, a very, very old type of cotter's house. And in the newer times, then was also interested in this social, community structures. For example, this is a fire station, and So let's say the Soviet times was an interesting time because there was a lot of money at first to build the museum, but in the end it actually meant that there were a lot of problems because, well, it was yesterday somebody who said that Estonian Open Air Museum has a very good team for restoration and so on. Actually, in the Soviet times, it did have a team, but it wasn't part of the museum, but it was of the entire republic. And when this team of restorers had other things to do, for example, in 1980, Nikulis, the church, was set on fire. So there was a lot of well, it wasn't. It was the team. The whole team was actually just employed on reconstruction of the church. So in the 80s, actually, the museum was facing a lot of problems with how to restore these older buildings, and also some new problems occurred because there was this national political friction, and in the end of the Soviet era actually meant that the Estonians kind of like saw this Estonian Open Air Museum as a national project. It was a symbol of Estonian nation. So in 1984, actually one of these symbols, Siirman barn dwelling, was set in fire. So it burned down, and it was as a real shock to the museum and also to the to the society as a whole. So in 1993, it was decided to restore this building as a replica to kind of fill in the void that was left by the fire, because it was a very notable ancient building, and there was none like that to be found in the villages anymore. And of course the 80s was just a difficult situation because of the economy. In the Soviet time, it was there wasn't funds anymore for the museum to build it. And when Estonia became independent, and it actually was for a time even worse, because it was now a market economy, and the museum had to kind of try to make it on its own. Of course, it was like still the state was founding it, but there was a need in services for the customers that the museum didn't have yet. So during the Soviet time, this collection of houses was really kept as a scientific collection. It was the museum was also had facilities for the audiences, but they were separated from the ethnographic areas. So, for example, when there was the director of the museum made a proposition that maybe we can use the tavern as a real tavern to sell drinks for people, then the scientific council said, like from 1 month, no, it's not possible. But when Estonia became independent, then those things also started to change. So it was a need to kind of reinvent the museum and how these exhibitions are shown to the public. So there was a lot of inspiration drawn from West Estonia, Western Europe, and the director of the museum, Merike Lang, at the time visited Detmold, for example, and history museum in Germany, and there were new perspective open to the museum to use actually the museum exposition for living history programs to actually show how these houses were used, how fire is made into stoves, how food can be prepared, how people lived and mingled in these houses. And also to use the museum in the winter time, which raised the question how to make those houses warm enough for the ladies of the houses to sit there and to have some events of these living history events. And of course there was a need for better customer service and for facilities. So in 1993, for example, Kolga Tavern was open to the public to actually use it as a real tavern as it was in its original place. Here I just put some photos of how to illustrate how this museum exposition could be used. So this is the Köstri Aseme farm. We had a photo yesterday in one of the slideshows, which shows that this old type of barnhouse stove is being heated. It's a smoke stove, so the smoke stays inside of the room, and it's you can only see it, this smoke ceiling, so to say, when you heat the stove, and it's a very it's a great experience for the visitors to see how it actually forms. And also to use the threshing barns for threshing, for drying crops and processing the crops. To use the two houses where the lady is sitting, it's also in Köstri Aseme farm, where there are these, I don't know how it's in English, but how to make textile. To show how butter, for example, is made while sitting on the veranda of one of those buildings. All to show how to have a Christmas meal in one of these older living houses. And also how to have a service, a real mass in a chapel. So these things began in the 90s, and actually it was, of course, a lot of questions like, is it good for the buildings themselves? And of course there was actually an accident in the beginning of 2000 when one of these barn dwellings wasn't correctly heated, and the building burned down. But instead of it, we decided to build a new house, Härjapea farm, which shows already the new era of rural architecture, where you could have a new type of building, which is nice and clean and spacious already. And then there was also a new tendency of not to show the typical side of these buildings, but also the family history and how these buildings were in their original place. For example, this Härjapea farm, which was opened in 2007, the interior is recreated from the family history, and the family history, the visitor can also see it from there. So there is a new type of exhibition created. And also it means a new type of museal buildings had to be built. For example, this Härjapea farm already was built in a way that you can heat it in the winter time. It's still very authentic, but it already has this new type of luxury, so to say. In the Soviet times, it would have not been possible to actually heat this exposition. And sometimes some adjustments to the original structure and layout had to be done. For example, in Puie schoolhouse, which was built in 2000, it was an education center for school programs, where you can see how an old school worked, and people can sit in their tables and see how it was in 1910. But it also meant that there should be some toilets in the house for the pupils, and there should be heating. So there was some adjustments made to the layout of this original building. And also a part of it is an office. So this office, for example, now has an interesting original feature, which is a toilet built inside of this, in original times it was a bedroom, and then it had a toilet in the corner. But since the house had to be adjusted, the layout had to be adjusted, so this toilet is now in the office side, so the visitor cannot see it. And also a newer adjustment was that when the second floor was used for seminars, for example, then there had to be made a fire escape, as you can see here on the picture. And also, the museum had some houses that the museum had taken apart during Soviet times, but didn't have the means to actually build them in the 90s. So some replicas were created. And a replica is a possibility to add modern day necessities like running water, toilets, sewer system, electricity, insulation. So this example is this Setu farm, and which is a very remarkable structure. It's an entire replica, but because of this, it has also a modern day toilet. It has heating, and we can use it throughout the winter. So it's not restricted to only summertime use, because a lot of these buildings still are only opened in the summer, the original ones. And some of these buildings can be used as they were meant to use in the original place. For example, this is a village shop that was then turned into a real, well, you can see the original layout, and you can see what kind of goods those village shops were selling, and you can actually buy some of those yourself. Interesting is maybe the Kolu tavern, what has happened to this one, because this is probably one of these places where the old structure is already a bit hidden under these newer layers, because it's a working tavern, which means that this on the left you can see this part where the horses used to be, but nowadays it has a wooden floor, so would be possible to use it as a place for parties and for visitors. And also there was an addition added to the original log structure, or this original house, which is this yellow building, which is a kitchen nowadays. And yes, this is our new kolkhoz building, which is not a log building, but I'm just showing you this as one of the latest editions where people can go inside and really use basically all of this, what they can see inside, and they can like touch the things that are in the exhibition. And we also have living history programs over there. Joosep will start talking about one of the newest exhibitions what we have. This is also a replica Kolga. I don't know how it is in English, maybe Joosep knows, but it's actually a barn or an animal shed, which is completely new. It was built right here in the same room here and brought to museum, and it has the modern modern conditions for keeping animals, so it's nice and warm, and children can go there and meet the animals. So we have come quite a long way from the Soviet style, very scientific collection to modern day museum where visitor is more open to the visitors invited to these buildings and to see and to touch everything that is shown there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Do you have any questions? Or you can also ask the questions later in the lunch break. The presenters will stay here, also Vivian. So thank you, Vivian.
Thank you.
So, all the presentations are recorded, so all will be watchable later also. Or, the presentations in the other hall also, so don't worry. And now The next presentation is Joosep Metslang, also from Estonian Open Museum. And I know Joosep already since 2011. And Joosep is a conservator of wooden buildings. He's a white master, I can say. He's the head of the Estonian Open Museum Department of Conservation of Museum Buildings and was supervising the Kolga Farms Granary Barn reconstruction process last year. This presentation focuses on the reconstruction of a log building and adapting it to modern energy efficient needs.
Yes.
Is it okay?
That's good.
It was exact. So enjoy.
Thanks. Ona is an old friend. She's used to be colleagues in the same museum. Let's start. I'm Joosep. I'm a carpenter. It's really fun to be here. There's a lot of carpenters here. I'm a head of a conservation department, so I should focus on maintaining old buildings in the museum. But it so happens I now and then have to deal with new construction, new structures as well. And it's really nice to be here. It's a very symbolic place to have this presentation because this building I'm going to talk about was built right here, in this really same room. So it's amazing to see how you change this building site into a conference room. That's really impressive. I'm going to talk about one building in the Open Air Museum in Tallinn. And it's reconstruction and adapting to our needs. Before I show you the overall photos of the building, I want to point out that the Kolga barn Granary was a dream to have a place for the kids to interact with farm animals and farm birds. We wanted to have one place where all the children could come together and learn about pigs and cows and sheep and chicken and ducks and all the other animals. There's so many. And with Kolga Farm and this barn project, we had this done. There was another wish to have a building back in its place in the museum. And that's the place where it gets a bit tricky because we're talking about a simple farmhouse that was on an island called Siirman, and it was built in the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century. Then it was noticed by the museum ethnographers and researchers and brought to our museum in the 70s and 80s, but it so happened that it burned down, or it was burned down in the 80s. And one of our dreams to have this building back is now come true, so we have it back there. There is so many philosophical questions about bringing a house from one place to another, but basically it lost its authenticity with the first round. And after burning it down, there's not much talk about authenticity anymore because it's completely reconstructed. So it's always a hard question how to reconstruct, what kind of outcome do we want to have, what kind of outcome the architect wants to have, the researcher wants to have, what's important for the museum and for the persons visiting the museum. So I think it's an exciting project, and I think you should quite like this presentation about this. So today I'll first talk about the Kolga Farm's barn Granary in Museal on the island. Then I'll talk about the re-erecting the first time in the 1970s, 80s, And then I'll talk about the third part where we reconstructed it lately. So, Hiiumaa, west of Estonia, and the building was from Emmaste region, west of Hiiumaa. You can see the original site, you can see the destination in Tallinn, and you can see where we are right now, in the south of Estonia. So this building project of reconstructing has covered most of Estonia. It's really a large kilometer. For us Estonians, we have a small country, and we land when you have to drive 100 kilometers, and it's really far away. It depends where you come from. So, in situ, there was once a Laku farm. There isn't much of it left anymore. If you look it up on the maps, there is a name still there, but there aren't any buildings left. Laku was built on an empty spot in 1870s and 80s. So they had a bar dwelling, probably more outbuildings, and this barred granary. The thing was built in different stages, one by one. I mean, first you need a granary, and then you need a place for the animals, a barn. And then sometimes you need some extra space, so you build a bit more on one side, a bit more on the other side. So it ended up that there was this J-formed building in the farm. It was inhabited by Koolmeister family, and I think I have one of their ascendants on this photo as well, together with Juta Saram, who was in charge of research at that time. So that's the plan of the building. It had can't show. Okay. Okay. I think one of the oldest parts is where the booths were and the horses, because from outside they sort of stick out, they have all the details. Then there's the granaries for clothing and grain, which are also a bit older. And then the hays and cows part, which is from the 1920s and 30s. And the last part there, where the carts were, that's a bit hard to say, but it was not a very firm structure. It was just like lots and poles and posts, and it was a fairly simple structure. So if you look at it from above, you can see that there's this one building built, then another building added, another added, another added. So it's a clever way how to save materials from one wall. It's a thing on Hiiu Island, and there were many of similar 100 years ago, but today it's quite hard to find. Once we had a measuring practice around Kaina, and there I saw a similar building or parts of it there. There was an old lady who still kept it, and she had horses and chickens, so I was looking around and doing documentation, found a few eggs, and it was like a living place still there, but it's quite scarce by now. Then comes the re-erecting part. The building wasn't in a very good shape. I later on show you a few photos of the situation where the logs were changed the first time. So on the photo you can see these pieces of metal that sort of stick out from there. On the back there's these small pieces of metal. So we had this system of, let's say, 4x4 or smaller piece of metal, and then Roman numbers on them, and corners taken off to know which symbol goes to what wall. So there was a lot of walls. It took a lot of time to get these walls marked. My colleagues made drawings of the walls, of the ground plan, of the rafter plan, of the beams and a lot of more documentation plus texts. Jutta Holst wrote a really long text about all the buildings, log by log. You can see this dismantling process. Some logs were in really bad shape. And then it was brought to our museum. The process of re-erecting took a very long time. It's like from 1978 to 83, around 5 years. It's quite a huge building. There's a lot of meters of log to build, so it's no wonder that it took a bit of time. I like this photo. It shows some winter scene where all the walls are back up and it doesn't have a reed roof yet. So for some time it had a plank roof on before the reed arrived. This is the situation with the walls. So in the first reconstruction row or re-erecting row, there was a lot of work with cows room, with closing room, bits and pieces from the grain and hay rooms, plus the usual of change of the lower logs. That's always there. Then the horses part was completely reconstructed. Basically, the cow room, you can see that it's quite red as well. So it was in a very bad shape. But it's no wonder. I mean, now that we have animals inside again, sheep and other animals, they produce a lot of moisture. So if it gets to the log walls, it takes 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. But then these logs are quite finished as well. So it figures. So that's the building after reconstruction and a bit before opening, I think. So that's the final site, and it's really fantastic that we had it. It's situated in the museum in quite a central place, so it's quite a dominant building in the center there. And then there's the opening party. We still have that gate that they are opening, and there's the burning building. There's either KGB or the Russian militia, well, not sure exactly who set it on fire, but it burned, and it was a disaster. It's one of the greatest fears you could have in a museum that's full of wooden buildings. And at the time of the fire, they were really fighting with to keep that small building at the end of the road. That's from the 18th century, a really old granary we have there. So luckily it survived. Another part of the granary, of this special granary, also prevailed. And the fire completely took the roof structure, and you can see the logs are quite influenced by the fire. And then now comes one of these philosophical questions: what to do in this situation? In some cases, they've built another structure inside this burnt house and have a roof on to cover it up. So sometimes it's possible to preserve this burnt down house as well. So that could have been a case, but it wasn't in this time. So, yeah, it's a very bad shape. And now comes the reconstructing part, and the photo above is made in this same room. The work was done in different phases. Now on this really photo you can see the whole work, And a bit of documentation work, I'll talk you about this a bit later on. The reconstructing work itself was done by Hobbiton, and Andreas is the head of it. And Taivo Härnapuu was the architect, so thanks to these guys. Really fantastic job they did. It's amazing. This place is really unique in Estonia. I'm really impressed about that. The reconstructing of the thing started with the project. I suppose before that it's the thought work that we should have it. We should have it back. Let's have it back. So I suppose for a number of decades, my colleagues in the museum worked on the idea that let's have it back. So in 2021, it finally was that far that we had an architectural project. The project did a few changes as we compromised with good looks and modern means. So from outside, we wanted to have it reconstructed as original as possible. But from inside, we wanted to add a few more functions that weren't there before. At one end, at the top of the J, you can see the toilets, because in that part of the museum, we basically didn't have any public toilets or toilet for wheelchairs, people with wheelchairs. So that's there, plus room for the staff. The Granary part, sorry. After the toilets, the two rooms, we wanted to have an exhibition. We wanted to show kids and audience what could you do with animal and bird products, not only food materials, but also the materials themselves, feathers, wools and such. And then at the curve, the J would be all the different animals. The place of the animals has been changed a lot. So where the first should have been the sheep are some birds and vice versa. So it's been a really tricky project. There's the huge fence around to keep the birds in a closed area. And there's a huge log fence there. Another change there. Originally, the barn granary was built out of fairly small logs. Those of you who were with me in the museum on Wednesday, I showed you that the building, the living rooms, had the best materials, and the granaries and the barns had smaller diameter, smaller logs. It was just the logic of the farmman. But this time we were changing this barn into a living room, basically, and we had to change the original diameters. If you would walk on Hiiumaa and go to a village and see a barn, the logs are about like 18, 20 centimeters, maybe a bit more, but they are not like very huge. But now we wanted to have water inside and keep the rooms warm in the winter time. So the outcome is that the walls are basically 20 centimeters thick, and the long grooves are about 10, 12 centimeters wide. So the logs changed a lot. And that means that the height of the house also rose quite a lot. If this would be a pile of logs for the Kolga farm, then it would be about that high. But it's that high. So there was some work with the architect to get the house look in proportion, more or less okay. And I think we did a trick with the end of the roof to bring it a bit more lower to have the house a bit more lower as well. Modernizing the building and using it in the winter time would mean significant changes to the foundations and the floors. If a barn from 19th century originally is either loose stones or fairly loose stones with some mortar, then now we wanted to have an insulated modern foundation and floor. So it's a complete change as well. So there's a compromise there. The roof is a reed roof, as it is on Hiiumaa, as it is in our museum as well. So I like the roof part. it's as authentic as it gets. And one change we later on did with Andreas was the foundation system. And the one really tricky part was the look of granite stones. In Hiiumaa it would have been round granite stones, but we wanted to have an insulated foundation there. So how to have a round rock in front of an insulation plate? That's a tricky part there. So you can try. There are different versions. Maybe you do a better outcome, but I'm really pleased what Andreas finally managed to do. The hardest part is the corner, where the vertical part meets with the horizontal part. And on that drawing you see this one wooden piece that's diagonally there over the granite. But my museum colleagues and I were a bit puzzled about having that there. So instead we have an L section of the granite. And you can see that later on. Then there was a lot of details. The architectural project was done from really high up and quite far away. So we had facade drawings, ground plan sections, but originally this building was really full of architectural details, or different logworks, different corner joints, different consoles, faces. The rafters had different sculpting under it. Now, different kind of openings, the doors and the windows, and in the not in the architectural project phase, but actually in the building phase, we sort of hastily started to look into all the detail that we could find and notice. So I made Andreas's life quite hard, I suppose. I was going through his old photos all the time, and I think I got it more or less in place. The one good part was the interior architect at the toilets part of the house. It got quite tricky. It's a question of having log walls, dividing the walls in between, then a number of toilets and different kind of, there's a shower there, and different other means inside the rooms. So we had Annika Pakku help with the interior, and that was a great relief to have her. The more we have interior architects, the better. Because if you do this in forehand, then it's so much better than to yell in the meetings and decide like quickly and hastily. So the more you do that, the better. Alright, so now it's the reconstructing part. That's the some phases of the foundation. You can see the insulation, you can see the water and plumbing. And after the concrete works were done, we had, depending on the room, the height of the foundation outside. And then on the lower part you can see the pieces of granite. There's in the center there. These are the L-shaped granite pieces. So it's not only like flat pieces, but L-shaped. And on top of the foundation, we would use those to have granite going straight to the log as well. Yeah. Originally, Andreas didn't plan this, so thanks. Thanks a lot. And here's a few photos before and after. On the black and white photos, you can see the situation in 1970s in Hiiumaa, and modern photos on the right. So this part of the house had round logs and air going under it, and now it's really a closed foundation. So, yeah, you can notice it's modern. This part of the house where the horses were kept, the foundation gets a bit more higher, and the one part we tried to have was this one bigger rock at the post there. But it's slightly different. Still, we have an insulated foundation. The corner there where the cows were kept, it had this rhythm of granite and limestone, so we had this, and that's the other side of that same house. Then it's the walls. I think that's one of my favorite photos as well. It's fairly there, and it's really a hard job to reconstruct a building that's not there anymore. And imagine all these logs in different diameters and root top system, and then to try to have it reconstructed. So it's a fantastic job there. The corner joint was such that it had a head, and the neck part was made a bit more thinner. So Hobbiton guys managed to do that. You can see it's a bit more straighter than originally. In Hiiumaa they had something like the Norwegians have, this shape of the neck there. It's a strange version of that. And we had this done. We had to talk about the root and top system and where it's more noticeable and where it's not. So from the outside, depending on the wall, we were going through that. And then there's the diameter of the logs. So depending on the room, we had either very small logs or very large logs. So we could have this mimicked. There are mainly smaller logs on that far behind part of the house. Okay, there's the tree. I'll talk about this later. This is the Granary part. This is a place where you notice one difference. Who notices it? With the walls, the log walls. There's one substantial difference. Hewing. It sort of happened that the Granaries have round logs. Originally it was hewing. And the problem was there that the architect saw photos of the 1980s building, the museum. And these photos were usually made quite far away. But if he or she would have looked under the name Laku, there were many more details to see. So there was a small confusion there. But it's a reconstruction, so let's have it this way. This is the end of a gable wall. We have the similar paneling there, and this quadrat opening there, that was a good find because we needed some place to have ventilation brought in and out. So we take this window-like thing, and we had to use it at the other side of the house as well. Then there's the consoles. Okay, that went wrong. There's a different log corner there. This is a case of if you have thicker material, so you really notice the original, the console is much more slimmer. But it's only for your eyes, okay? This is a part of a post there, so there's this special cut there, so we have this back. And this is the end. And the one addition is these quadrat openings at the end of the gable. that's the process. The Hobbiton guys came in, brought the house, had it erected in a day or two maximum. And the whole project was done in 2 parts. So they had this long part of the J down here, brought it to north, then came back and brought the curved part of the J. So really impressive job. They really know what they do. It's fantastic to see a team work together. It takes years and years to get it done. So this is a good place here. The roof structure. The original roof is about rafters and beams, and we had it mimicked quite similarly. There were like 3 or 4 types of rafter ends, so we had this done. It's either like this shape or straight shape. Here we have this phase in the corners as well. So that was really fun to have done again. There's the corner there, and we have the reed roof on. There's a number of companies who make reed roofs in Estonia, mainly from the islands of west of Estonia, and there's quite a number of those. So that's in very good hands. And I have a later on photo of the end result. This is what we call the rafter party. It's really important to have if you want to have good luck with the building. And when the rafters were up and we had the builders and the museum people brought together, and we celebrated that the house is re-erected. So we have some dinner, lunch, we have a glass of vodka, and we hope for the best. And one more thing about the roof. It sort of happened that oak tree had been growing by the side of the house. And after it burnt in 1980s, it was still there, and in about 40 years it grew quite big. And we noticed it when we started to build it. Okay, there's an oak tree, what should we do? But the Hobbiton guys were so quick that it stood there. So, okay, we have an oak tree at the top of a reed roof. That's a really bad plan. I had to clean it each autumn. Yeah, okay, I'll survive. And the one great thing about that oak tree, that it saved the building from another oak tree. The other oak tree got mad in last year's October, the storm. So the other guy decided to come down and fall on our house, but our special oak tree saved the house. So it caught the other one, we got it away from the house, cut it into pieces, took it away, and then it's all fine. So, some details there. We didn't have all the details left there, so we had to look around in the same Kolga farm actually for the hinges and the locks and the old photos. So sometimes these hinges are really long and sometimes shorter in proportion. We were counting the pieces of planks, we were counting the length of the hinges, we were looking through the photos of what kind of closing systems we have. So we more or less have the same outcome from outside. Now, Andreas had some clever way to insulate the door as well. So from outside it looks like a plank door, but actually there's some insulation even inside. You can't see it. That's the granary part, and they got this special wooden log from somewhere as well, which was a really good find. You can see these, the way these vertical planks and the horizontal parts are glued together, and there's the modern door or window, how they call it, so we get more light inside the exhibition room. And sometimes we didn't have any material at all. This is a door that wasn't there in the 70s either, so we had to see parts here and there and then decide what to do. Sometimes, for instance, a window, we only knew the division that it had. It's a 6-frame window, so we had a 6-frame window. The one problem with the original windows and the new ones is that now we had to have a winter-tight house, so we have an extra frame for that window. And when the guys cutting these pieces here, so they stole a few centimeters from the width and height to have a more modern window inside the hood. Sometimes really fun details came from nice places. This is from Juta's description from the textbook, and she made this fun little thing, like a sketch of a thing, and now we have it on the house as well. And the doors work, the windows work. It's really important to open the windows because the moisture inside, we should have even more ventilation. I mean, these elements create a lot of moisture. And that's just a few photos from inside. You can see the staff room and the toilets, and this tower with many doors, it's for the chicken. I think that's the the biggest and the noblest of all the chicken huts you can find. It has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels, 4 levels, and the chicken choose which level she wants to live at and lay eggs. That's it. It was a hard project. It's a strange project, but we've done it and it's there. So we have a place for kids to come to mingle with the animals we like. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Joosep. And because Joosep is running away later, please, if you have any questions, ask them now.
Bye.
Oh.
Do you have any theory about why the original barn would have had hewn surfaces? Like, why would they have gone to all of that effort for a barn?
Ask again, please.
Do you have any theory or any ideas of why they would have hewn, made the surfaces of the original barn flat? Why would they have taken the time to do that?
It sort of depends on the function of the house. If it's a barn, then it's round logs. If it's a granary, the granary is the most festive part of the farm. So if you are a poor farmer, then you have at least front the door wall hewn. And if you are a rich man from Vivian County, then it's all 4 walls, plus from inside, Muhumaa as well. These guys do fantastic granaries. So the granary was hewn. And I started to work in the museum in January 2023. But basically the guys had already built it here, so it was too late. So that's all.
More questions? No? Not at all? Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks. Good luck.
Now we are reaching the third presentation, and after that we have 1 hour lunch. And as I mentioned, I worked at the Estonian Open Museum. I worked 10 years as a manager of training programs for house owners on a traditional building materials and techniques. And the next presentation is about the existing renovation practice among house owners, so I'm looking forward to hear the results. Alois is a researcher at the Estonian Open Museum, involved in studying and developing renovation solutions for detached houses in Estonia under the Live IP Builders project. Please welcome Alois, Andreas, and give us some really good information and numbers, I hope.
Lots of numbers. So, thank you, Anna, for the introduction. As she said, I'm Alois. I have a background in architecture. And at the Open Air Museum, my main area of research is the question of renovation of detached housing. So, why renovation? As I'm sure most of you have heard of the Renovation Way for Europe, as the Union has committed to achieving climate neutrality by 2050, as buildings currently consume about 40% of the energy in Europe, it has been decided that the building stock needs to become more energy efficient. In 2020, Estonia completed its long-term strategy for building renovation, which basically defined how many buildings, how many square meters we actually need to renovate and make more energy efficient. So as you can see, non-residential buildings and apartment buildings form the majority by the square area. However, by absolute numbers, we see that we will need to renovate up to 105,000 detached homes by year 2050. Which means that the current renovation volumes, or the yearly renovation volumes in Estonia, will need to go up 5 times by 2040. However, that is looking at the building stock as a whole. When we look at detached housing by itself, the renovation volumes, the amount of square meters that we renovate each year needs to be 20 times larger, which is the largest necessary increase within the entire building stock. And it is quite common knowledge that construction practices and the age of the building stock is somewhat troubling, that will need to be renovated, meaning that it's quite likely that before any insulation can be added or heating systems updated, we will also need to touch upon the problem of deterioration and durability of the load-bearing structures as well. This can be titled as a deep renovation, basically, which would need to have adequate depth, meaning that we use enough energy conservation measures, those being better windows, more insulation, a better heating system. The work needs to be of good quality, meaning that the insulation is actually airtight and functions as it is supposed to. A thorough planning, which means that the renovation works will need to be done in a thought-out order and process. And it also needs to be done with anyway repair works, which means that if the owner is already going through the process, so let's say replacing the lowest course of logs, which is very commonly decayed over the decades, when you're already opening up the facade and you're already extracting that building element, you might as well put in the extra sum of investment and also start incorporating added insulation into it. Because if you exchange the log, if you put back the facade covering, if you even order or put back newer boards, not even the original ones, that means that to add insulation, you will need to undo the previous restoration works, which is not exactly very efficient. To help homeowners in this very difficult process, the European Commission has recommended that existing energy performance certificates, which describe the existing level of energy performance, that they will be developed into building renovation passports, or BRPs, which contain 2 primary modules. By having input data of the general building, its measurements, its year of construction, you have on-site audit data, which would describe any noticeable damages, the extent of renovations, automated data, that being from energy monitor, long-distance energy consumption readers, and also reference building data, which I will start explaining quite shortly. That would all go into the building logbook, which would describe what is the current state of the building, which are the renovation works. Right now in Estonia we do have the building registered, but it's relatively generic in the data that it contains. It has general structural descriptions, it has the estimated year of construction, but if we want to take that data and actually provide any renovation advice based on that or do any energy calculations, then the existing level of detail is unfortunately quite poor. And based on that data, we can develop the renovation roadmap, which basically understands the building type, it understands the owner's limitations, it understands the homeowner's ambition towards energy performance, and we would provide a staged renovation roadmap basically. It tells you which renovation works, in which order, in which year, and with which solutions you would need to use in order to complete your renovation process, and by year 2050 you would have a building with good durability and good energy performance. Now, why I'm mentioning the renovation passport is the fact that today or other European countries use energy auditors for this. They compile the renovation roadmap by going on site. However, in Estonia, we currently don't have the existing manpower to audit 105,000 detached homes. Not today, and it's very unlikely that we would have that manpower even in 10 years. Which means that we will need to look at automated solutions, which is where the reference building comes into play. Let's say that the reference building that I'm speaking about today is the pre-World War II wooden log house, which in terms of the construction period, approximately 30% of the detached housing stock is built before World War II. And how many buildings of those are logs or have a log structure? It's not exact. We don't have any reliable statistics for this, but we have estimated that the number might be between 30 and 40,000 that will need to be renovated. As we do know that the predominant construction type was indeed horizontal log. However, we do know that there are also frame structures and others as well within that section of the building stock. And why it's important to understand how to renovate these buildings is because they represent a part of Estonian architectural heritage. It's not simply a question of how much insulation, it's also a question of how to respect the building's proportions, how to respect the existing architectural details of the building, where do you put the insulation, how much is, where's the compromise, where do you find the balance between adequate energy savings and maintaining the building's architectural character. So, in order to provide within the building renovation passport any automated estimation of damages, how to understand which are the most likely damages present within the building stock, we need to study these buildings basically, and we need to know which structures might be the most vulnerable, which damages are most likely to occur, and how are these damages caused in terms of in terms of the question of durability. And also, we also know that homeowners have already started with the renovation wave with solutions that they find online, solutions that they get from their neighbor, from handbooks. And let's just say that homeowners are already renovating, but the problem is we don't really know how they are renovating. We don't have any comprehensive overview of which renovation solutions are being used, which ones would continue to be good solutions to use in the renovation wave, and which solutions or practices we would need to, let's say, dissuade homeowners from using, or that we would need to educate homeowners about the risks of using certain renovation solutions. And the main questions here are which structures are most commonly renovated? Do the existing renovation works actually improve the technical state of the structure as well? Or has the homeowner only looked at the question of energy savings? Which renovation solutions are most commonly used? The question is of how much insulation the homeowners use, for example, and which heating systems are they using, and what is the estimated quality of these renovation solutions as well. Existing research is somewhat limited if you want any reliable national statistics. Currently, we have based this knowledge on experience of specialists and some previous studies. I've brought some examples down here as well. However, these studies are somewhat, let's just say, old, and they had slightly different areas of research and different research questions, which means that as a side product, they might have produced interesting knowledge in terms of the statistically most likely damages and use of invasive solutions, but the end goals were still slightly different. And I will be speaking about two studies that we have done to answer these questions that I've said. The Estonian Open Area Museum has coordinated consultation services for owners of historic rural buildings in Estonia since 2015. And from 2019, the data from these consultations has been collected into a database as well, with a good structure that would have been good for statistical analysis. And it would also provide a substantial and randomized sample of damaged wooden log houses. And by 2023, when we did the study, the entire database from 2019 consisted of more than 300 buildings, summed up to more than 1,000 structures renovated by the network of consultants. Now, how the consultation service and the reports are structured. Basically, the owner of an old house, not under heritage protection, can request for a construction consultant to inspect the house, provide an evaluation and recommendations concerning any damages or any general renovation questions that the homeowner might have. And each report contains data concerning the building's general properties, its construction, its structure types, its size, which structures are damaged, what are the types of damages, which are the damage details, and how the consultant has provided renovation recommendations. As my time is somewhat limited, I can't go into all details that we got from this study, but luckily it has already been published as well as part of a previous conference presentation. It's titled Technical State, Renovation Need and Performance of Renovation Solutions of Estonian Wooden Log Houses, which goes much more into detail of the study than I will go into today. However, I will highlight some main findings concerning the typical damages. As you can see in these two drawings, we have highlighted all or most of the typical points of damage or problematic technical solutions that have caused damages. This is, as you can see, the list is quite long. It can exist in a single foundation connection detail within a foundation, floor, and wall. And the picture is just as diverse when looking at the roof as well. Now we studied we called it renovation needs from the consultation networks. It means that renovation need means that a consultant has decided that a certain structure or detail will need to be repaired or replaced, or other aspect in need of general renovation. So we studied which building structure we are looking at, what is the damage detail, and the suspected causes for the deterioration. So the sample at the end, after filtering the 300 buildings, was 208, and it consisted of 115 detached houses and 93 barn dwellings, which has been, or barn dwellings have already been somewhat explained by Vivian in her presentation as well. So I hope you're somewhat familiar in what is the difference between a detached house and barn dwelling. And we found the most common structures were somewhat, not surprisingly, the boundary surfaces of a building, those being the walls, the roofs, and the foundations. Not all consultation reports describe damages. Some simply highlighted that the structure was actually in good condition, as you can see from the yellow lines, or the condition was unspecified. As you can see, the highest number was among heating systems, mostly, which was somewhat interesting, which means that, I have a theory that it was most likely due to heating systems being such a complicated and specific area of construction that a general construction engineer or consultant might not have or let's say the expertise or the insights into, or have the confidence to actually provide detailed renovation solutions. And in those reports, it's most common that the consultant has recommended actually asking another consultant who is more versed in stove and other heating systems. So the renovation need among 208 houses concerning walls was 77%, or 77% of 208 had damaged walls. And 88% of those damages were a combination of a material decay, meaning wood rot or from insects. It was also sagging or shifting blocks, 35%, or damaged external boarding. The extent of damages concerning facade finishings was surprisingly low. But within this study, we didn't have the opportunity to go quite into detail why this percentage was quite low, because in another study we saw quite different numbers. But in the graph you can see all the different areas of damage. The most common being, unsurprisingly, the lowest course of blocks. 45% were described to have serious material decay, followed by the topmost log courses damaged by roof leaks, the log courses beneath windows damaged by improper windowsills, etc. And the degradations generally did occur due to moisture from participations, roof leaks, capillary rise to the foundation, and a general lack of maintenance. As you can see, different examples of damages: damaged lower logs on the left, damaged upper logs from roof leaks, and a damaged window, which can happen, which you can see what a serious damage can happen when a simple thing like a roof, like a metal windowsill is improperly installed or has become too deteriorated. Roof renovation need was 63%. The most common existing roof solution among Estonian houses was asbestos cement sheets, and it was quite common that under these asbestos the roof material, the original roof covering was still present, meaning that there were wood shingles, there were hay roofs, there were reed roofs, which was quite expected. As there would have not, during the Soviet period, there probably was not much sense in removing the old roof structure, roof covering, which still, in its somewhat damaged or old state, would have still provided some predictive properties, and due to that, they simply placed the new asbestos cement coverings over the old roof structure. And again, material decay of the roof structure in 57% of the reports. However, you can see the variety of damages was somewhat more wide when compared to walls. There were a lot of localized damages from roof leaks, 28%. Missing rain gutter systems was a serious problem as well. And interestingly enough, 20% were described where the entire roof structure was either decayed to a point where it needed to be replaced entirely, or the roof structure or the roof rafters had sagged or shifted in a very grave manner, meaning that the rafter dimensions and the rafter or the placement between the pairs of rafters was too low, or the roof loads were too high, meaning that when renovating roofs, there might be quite a substantial amount of buildings where the entire roof structure will need to be replaced in its entirety. And degradations occur due to, once again, moisture, participations, roof leaks, poor water tightness of the roof covering. That means that not only holes, but poor roof flashing, poor or missing ridge caps, etc. You can see a damaged rafter from a roof leak, damaged asbestos cement sheet roof that will, in this example, needs immediate replacement, under which I think you can even also see the original wood shingles in this under that missing panel. And poor design of the load-bearing structure, where a horizontal element had apparently been decayed over the decades, and it had been replaced by a substantially under, with an element with a substantially small cross-section, which is way too small for this element, or for this roof, which is simply an example of an improper or somewhat lazy repair solution that might have been done 30 years ago, 50 years ago, who knows. And foundations, interestingly enough, the renovation need was the same, 63%. And here the degradations occurred due to the most diverse set of problems. The most common damage types are eroded mortar joints and cracks in the masonry. However, these are symptoms of other problematic aspects of the foundations and plinths. The most common problem actually were cement-based repair solutions. Historically, rural buildings in Estonia had foundations that had either limestone or others or granite foundations that were tied with lime mortar. However, lime and cement within the same structure don't really work well in terms of their hydrothermal properties. They aren't very compatible, which means that if you repair a lime-based solution with a cement-based either mortar or plaster, it will start to trap moisture within the foundation, which means that the capillary moisture that absorbs from the ground will have nowhere to go, and in the worst-case scenario, it will end up at the top where the logs are and start decaying the logs, especially if there is no moisture barrier. But these degradations also occur from not only moisture from precipitations and ground moisture, but also from aspects hindering drying, like low plinth height, foliage that's way too close, and also there are other mechanisms that can damage the foundation, mainly frost heave, which means that if the foundation is not deep enough, the ground during winter times will freeze and expand, which over the years will start to degrade the foundation over decades, meaning which will lead to cracks and subsidence in the worst case. And yeah, in the right you can see what is an example of a fairly recently renovated building, but the question of the low foundation has not been addressed, and neither have they solved the question of foliage, which has led to degradations of the rainfall protector. There's moss growing on the boards, the soil is way too high, which means that especially if there's no rainwater system, which means that all the moisture will run straight into the ground. It will splash back onto the facade. And this connection detail between the soil, the foundation, and the wood element was very critical. And even today, renovation is still a problematic aspect when discussing new renovation solutions. Now, going into the topic of renovation solutions, I'm speaking about study number 2, which was fieldwork and analysis of dwellings in the Esta and Kareda village regions. And this study was very expansive. There were quite a few areas of research, which again I will not be covering today. They have been somewhat published or made available as a report in Estonian on the website of the Ministry of Climate, as this was done under this project. However, today I will be speaking mainly about the aspects of which renovation solutions are being used and what is their quality. So we did fieldwork in the region of Järvamaa, in a lot of small villages and regions, as you can see, from Ataste to Põdra. And as a result of fieldwork with volunteers and museum workers, 64 dwellings in total were inventoried. However, only 37 of them were log dwellings. And for this reason, the dwellings that did not match the topic of today's conference, as due to my limited time, I will not be going into much detail of those. And we conducted visual inspection and interviews with the owner concerning the technical state of the building and what are its structures, which renovation solutions and works the owner has done, and an evaluation of the technical condition of the structures, as well as types and extent of damages. How do you evaluate the technical state of a wall or a foundation? As this was done in cooperation with the Italian University of Technology, we had a, let's say, system of evaluation or a scoreboard of 0 to 5. 0 meaning in urgent need of renovation, and 5 meaning that describing an excellent condition with only maintenance if it's necessary. As you can see, from 1 to 4, it's a description of the extent of damages and the need for renovation in terms of whether it's in 1 year, 3 years, or 10 years. And homeowners were also interviewed concerning the history of the dwelling, their relation to the building, their own social background, which renovation works they have conducted, because this is important. Renovation works are very difficult to ascertain or detect without having the owner present, because if the works are completed, the facade finishing, the facade covering has been installed, you don't really know what is inside this wall or what is between the load-bearing structure and the facade finishing, meaning that the only source of information for this would be the homeowner, especially if there's, as it was very common, there was no design documentation, there was very little cooperation with the local government, so they would have very little information about this as well. Also, we asked what were the works that they conducted, and were they satisfied with the results? What are their maintenance practices, and their attitudes towards renovation, self-building, and what is their understanding of how well are they versed in renovation knowledge, or where do they go to if they want to renovate their buildings, and what are the main information sources? And also about future plans. Are they finished with the renovations? What else do they plan to do? How soon? And also the attitudes towards government grants and funding in terms of how do they fund these renovation works. So the sample dwellings, or the log houses section, were built between 1900 and 1939, and they were divided into 3 subtypes. Again, we had detached houses, 29 of those. We had 6 more archaic barn dwellings, which, let's just say, the definition between archaic and modernized is sort of my own interpretation here, because it describes a building where you have the living quarters and the, let's say, animal husbandry and agricultural rooms under the same roof. And basically, archaic means that these are barn dwellings that are more similar to the ones at the Estonian Open Air Museum. However, the modernist barn building was the sort of reinvented building type that was more common during the period of this First Estonian Republic from 1920 to 1939, let's say. And we also analyzed periods of use. We found that 73% had a permanent resident, and the buildings were used year-round. However, 27% of those were used for limited periods as holiday homes, and this difference came out in the results as well. That let's say permanent residents are somewhat more active in renovation. So we compared the extent of renovation by structure. Renovation meant that the homeowner described that, oh, in let's say 2005, we repaired the walls, or we replaced the windows in 2011, or we did something with the heating system in 2018. And basically we can see that the highest percentage of renovation are in the interior, the windows and heating systems, interestingly. And the lowest extent of renovation is with the rainwater systems, critically low, 8%, roofs, foundations and floors, with wall renovation being somewhere in the middle. And from this we can conclude that renovation, or what also came out, was that renovation is done in stages, meaning that the work is phased out for the owner. They do renovation works by, let's say, section, meaning that they don't insulate the entire perimeter of the walls. They do it, let's say they do one wall, then they do two walls, and then, let's say in 5 years they finish perhaps the final wall. Renovation works are done room by room, meaning that if you change the floors, if you update the heating system, or update the windows, or let's just say you're just simply renovating the interior, homeowners like it when you can go in like manageable phases. You can finish, let's say that when you finish a room, you do all the floors, you do the windows and the, let's say, the wall coverings. You get this sort of feeling that, okay, I've done something. You have reached the benchmark, basically. And I theorize that this is a very important moment in the renovation sort of psychology of the homeowner. And why do they begin with windows, the interior, and heating systems? Basically, I theorize that these are the most manageable works for the homeowner, and also the poor condition are the most noticeable to them on a daily basis. You notice when the window has poor air tightness, you notice its cracks, you notice when the interior is worn, and you also notice when your heating system is poor during the winter times. So that would explain why homeowners prioritize these structures the most. And also, why are the least amounts of works done on foundations and floors and roofs? Probably due to the inconvenience of it. Roof renovation can't be done in stages. You need to do the entire roof in one go, and especially if you have a barn dwelling, if the roof area is very, very large, that means that it will be a very large undertaking. Concerning floors, it likely affects everyday life to a very large extent. Again, why do people renovate floors room by room? It means that you can vacate the room that you're renovating, but you can still use the rest of the building, which means that you will need to not move out of the house. And concerning foundations, I also think that foundations, due to them being so low, so hidden by foliage, so hidden by soil, I think the homeowners simply don't notice them, or it's not in their importance is not highlighted enough in this renovation paradigm. Let's say you see the walls, you see that okay, their area is large, they must have a lot of heat loss. You notice the windows, you notice the roof. But the foundation and the plinth, it's only like half a meter from the ground to your walls, so perhaps that is why homeowners underestimate its importance in terms of both energy efficiency and in assuring the durability of the building. We also assessed the average condition of structures. We found that most are in a more or less satisfactory condition on average. The exception being rainwater systems, which was extremely low, meaning that they were not non-existent. The highest were heating appliances, again, and the interior, again going back to the fact that they are most often renovated. And you can see some conditions are not present on the graph, and that is to reason that their evaluations were not collected within the inventory. As I mentioned, it was a very large study. And there were certain, let's say, there were some, not mistakes, but certain things flew under the radar, let's say, in the inventory tables. And we also compared how has the renovation quality improved comparing renovated and unrenovated structures. And indeed, we can see that the condition does improve. Most noticeable with the rainwater systems, and also interiors and roofs, which means that also looking at their average condition, they are quite good, they are above 4, which means that homeowners generally know how to renovate them, or perhaps they hire workmen to do it, and due to this reason, their technical condition or the quality of renovation works is somewhat better. However, the fact that none of the averages are at the top, which was actually present among other building types in the study, is concerning, which means that all renovation solutions have some deterioration. Now, renovation extent of roofs, I will be going through the structures now. The renovation extent of roofs was 30%, more common among detached houses than bar dwellings, because of course detached houses have a smaller roof area. It's done only by permanent residents, meaning that homeowners who use their houses as holiday homes have not really gotten to roof renovation. The technical state is improved from 2.5 to 4.4, which is the highest improvement compared to other structures excluding rainwater systems. However, 64% of these renovated roofs were still inventoried to have certain damages. They were not great. Damages were listed, meaning that a single structure could have one type of damage or 6, let's say. And in terms of roofs, the extent of damages was only one damage type, which means that it was not great. But still, they were found to have moths. There were problems concerning waterproofing around chimneys and sometimes even around dormers. And there was sagging, which goes back to the fact that some homeowners have renovated roof structures which would have needed to have been replaced, actually, which were not technically in a good enough condition for the roof covering to have been replaced. But there was also a sort of middle ground in roof maintenance, meaning that 52% of roofs that were not renovated were still somewhat maintained. They had either new ridge flashings or ridge boards or new leaf flashings, which means that the final division was actually in thirds. We had a third roofs that were renovated and finished. We had a third that were still maintained, however unrenovated, and then a third that were minimally maintained and unrenovated. Now, renovation extent of walls. We have 46%, more common again among detached houses, and done more commonly by permanent residents. However, let's say a fifth were still done also by holiday homeowners. The installation works, interestingly enough, were generally done between the year 2000 and 2010, which is a surprisingly high age. And the most common insulation material was mineral wool. I was very happy to find that oil-based insulation materials like foam materials luckily were not used when insulating the walls. However, luckily it was generally also added externally. There were certain examples of internal insulation as well. However, that was luckily also between was not more than 50 millimeters, which is somewhat acceptable. However, the external insulation layer was most commonly only 10 centimeters, and from then on it was either lower. The worst was 30 centimeters, which means that's little more than a mineral wool wind membrane. But there were also some examples of higher insulation thicknesses as well, like 150 millimeters and 200. Let's just say 200. Today, when we talk about renovation, or we talk about adequate energy performance, 200 would actually be the optimal amount, which means that, as we can see, it was only 6%. So the main conclusion was that the majority of buildings that have already been renovated have too little insulation, actually. And the extent of wall renovation varied as well. We found that 71% were renovated throughout the entire house, and 29% insulated only partly, meaning that they described that, oh yeah, I insulated my southern wall, and then in 2009 we did the east wall, again going back to the fact that homeowners do renovation in stages and even going by structures. And it was also clear that some homeowners expressed regret in using too little insulation thicknesses, meaning that they have already recognized the benefits of more insulation. And the technical state was improved from 2.5 to 3.5. However, some damages were still present as well. We're running out of time. Now, in terms of the facade coverings, it was quite clear that There was very poor technical solutions used. Paint deterioration was very high. Rainfall protectors were poor, air tightness was poor, waterproofing was problematic, and the wooden boards have, and as you can see in the left-hand corner, I hope it's not too small, you can see the result of the renovation in stages, meaning that the homeowner has insulated the walls, but not under the roof eave. And also there's a question of how do you tie the decorated rafter end to it as well. Again, going back to the fact that there's no design documentation, homeowners rarely think of renovation works as a whole. And yeah, situations like this are not very sadly. Foundation renovation extent was low, done mostly by permanent residents. Insulation materials are foam substances. Luckily, no mineral wool was stuck down there. However, the thickness of the insulation material was not really inventoried. And 75% were found to have damages, and the technical state improvement was very low as well, from 2.4 to only 3.0. Going back to the fact that foundations are renovated quite poorly, there are not enough proper ground slopes, meaning that the rainwater is not directed away from the building. The plaster that has been installed has already begun to deteriorate near to the ground by the foliage and the moisture from the soil. Water drainage is not adequate, and moisture protection is problematic as well. You can also see that what happens when a homeowner, again, I hope it's not too small, but you can see the blue XPS insulation that has been left unfinished, I estimate, for several years. You can see the cement fiberboard has been placed near the foundation, but it's not attached to it, it's just placed there with a slant, with some rocks against it. So yeah, we can see that I can't even actually imagine what the problem is here, why the homeowner has not finished it, but that's that. Floor renovation, I will, as I'm running out of time, I will be skipping floor flow, but I would like to talk about windows for now. Window types, window renovation was quite common, and in terms of the division of the windows, we have three types. We have imitation, we have a new division, and we have undivided windows. These are examples of, let's say, imitation. On the top, you can see the original window that has survived, and on the bottom, you can see an example where the homeowner has tried to order something similar to the original. The right-hand example is just somewhat poor, but the left-hand example was a sort of a sad story where the homeowner wanted exact replicas. The production or the window construction company came there, they took photos, but you can see the result that the homeowner got is not. You can see the idea is there, you can see the elements of the windows is there, but all the proportions have become messed up. Meaning that even if the homeowner goes through the process of contacting the construction company and wanting to achieve the best possible outcome, they can still be shot in the foot by somewhat shoddy production. And then, what is the authentic division for a historic house? Let's say windows have been enlarged during the Soviet period. There are new window divisions, and what is the authentic division here? Let's say the left-hand side is an example of a new window, but the right-hand ones are all the examples that are the original ones, or like the pre-renovation windows. And like, what is the homeowner supposed to do? What is the historically or like accurate window division here? What is the most authentic for this building type? So you can see that on the left they have gone sort of a compromise between all of these. But yeah, this is a serious question. And then how do you combine authenticity with modern needs? If you want to have a terrace door, which is next to a historic window, this division is not historic. We don't have any examples of this, and so you can see a homeowner can become easily confused at what would be the best window division in this case. And I think I need to severely running out of time. But I also did a ranking system, basically, where you can see that I matched the technical condition evaluation sum and the number of renovation works. And you can see that the technical condition goes, the orange one, goes in quite a steady incline, meaning that we have quite a wide variety of technical states, meaning that we don't have any gaps, that like certain buildings are in good state, some are up, some are in bad state, etc. We have a steady incline. And you can see that within the ranking, the worst building with the lowest number of points and Siirman renovation works at number 1. This is not a ruin. Someone actually lived in that building during the time of the inventory. And beneath you can also see what happens when renovation works are started, left and finished over different years. And yeah, it's not a good state. And in the middle we can see that the average amount of renovation works does provide an average sum of points. And then the top of the ranking was very interesting, where the complete technical state sum, these two buildings are next to each other, but the top one has only 6 renovation works, and the bottom has 11, the maximum number, which can show that proper maintenance and not exactly renovating in terms of having a new renovation solution, but maintaining the existing structure can give you a comparable technical state to a number of different renovation works. And this is a special mention. This building was excluded. However, you can see it has a maximum number of points. The number of renovation works was the maximum as well, but it had to be excluded because it came out that this homeowner, what they described as renovation was, okay, we tore down the roof, we tore down the walls, we built a new foundation, and then we had new walls and we had a new roof, basically. So for them, renovation meant that they tore down the entire old building and built a new building, essentially. Which, and for this reason, it had to be excluded, because this is not renovation, this is not maintaining the existing structure, but it was still an interesting occurrence within the study. So the main conclusions, I will finish, I try to wrap up now. The walls, the roofs and foundations are most damaged due to excess moisture, which means that any building surveys and renovation measures should prioritize these structures. We also estimated what are the national renovation volumes from these damages from the first study, and we found out that we essentially would need 2,800,000 square meters of new roof material, which would need to be replaced within the building stock immediately, and 763 kilometers of lot material to replace all the damaged lowest wall parts in Estonia, based on these studies, which is, I don't know how many times you can drive across Estonia. You can drive across Estonia with this single running wall. And the damage transfer is great, meaning that if you have a damage on the roof, then you have damage in the wall, then you get a damage in the facade finishing, and then it trickles down into the foundation, or it comes from the foundation into the wall. And lack of maintenance can cause a snowball effect, where the amount of repair work before renovation works becomes so great that basically the building is renovated poorly, or requires so much money to be renovated that the homeowner doesn't renovate this building at all. Yeah, homeowners generally renovate structures based, once again, in stages and based on urgency from daily contact. And they appreciate the opportunity to renovate in stages by themselves or by hiring a local workman, meaning that they think in terms of of the bathroom floor, they think of the living room windows, okay, I need to repair a stove, etc. And stage renovation is overwhelmingly preferred to deep renovation in one go. And uncoordinated and unfinished renovation works can result in a worse technical state than an unrenovated, adequately maintained dwelling. And I would like to finish with the fact that the quality of renovation works does not only affect the building structure and its heat loss, but also its life cycle and its future in terms of if it's renovated properly, if it's renovated with its actual building, with its heritage in mind, the next generation will see value in continuing to maintain for this building. If the building is renovated poorly, if the facade finishing if the finishing material is poor, the paint is weird, the window division is not followed, and if also the historic material has been destroyed as well, you don't have any photographic material how the windows were supposed to be, or what was the original facade roof covering. Basically, if you destroy the heritage through the renovation process, the next generation will not see value in continuing to maintain it. The building will be sold or left to deteriorate, which is not the goal of renovation. We need to aim for the highest possible life cycle of each building, and quality of renovation is a question of both the heat loss, the energy performance, the durability, and the architectural quality of the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Alois. I have one question.
Okay.
Did you saw any house maintenance books?
House maintenance.
How to keep the house? Do the owners have the books how to maintain your house?
They describe mostly like asking their neighbor, asking their relative that renovated, or are you asking about the study or us, the museum? Yeah, we have handbook, certain handbook, the Vana Maja käsiraamat. We have Vana Maja käsiraamat, currently only in Estonian, but it's available at the museum shop. We have some pamphlets as well available, and we are also developing new renovation solutions as part of the Builders project to meet all of these renovation and durability problems, and that in the future we hope to incorporate into this automated building renovation passport in the end as well. Yeah, see on see Vana Maja. And we have a pamphlet of examples of restoring log buildings. Some of these solutions are already somewhat, let's say that we would also already like to add certain, not corrections, but we would like to make some of those solutions even better in terms of energy performance. But yeah, there are good examples of what are good solutions, which are poor, the reasons they are poor, and it's very positive that there are examples from actual solutions that homeowners have used, with actual feedback from a very qualified building physics engineer in Estonia concerning which solutions are good, which are poor, and the reasons why they might not be optimal solution for that building specifically. It's called näiteid paikmaade kasutamisest.
Thank you. Now we have a 1 hour lunch break, and questions during the lunch break.